Hi. Have you been guilty of this? You know there is an important event coming up next day morning and it's already 10:30 in the night. You are surfing on a social media. You know you're supposed to stop. You make a resolution by 11 o'clock. That will be my last video or whatever it is. And you again start surfing. By the time you realize it's already 11:15 and you say, oops, I missed the deadline. Why not make it 11:30? And that 11:30 is never 11:30, it's almost 12 because the reels are so interesting we just lose the track of the time. And by the time it's 12 o'clock, there is a voice inside screaming yelling at us saying, stop, you got to get up early in the morning. So now you are on a major guilt trip. So what do? Switch off the phone, try to get up early in the morning. Obviously it will not be very fresh, pretty groggy. And you make a resolution, I will never do this mistake again tonight. From tonight, I will sleep sharp at 10:30 and you know, that never happens. The same ritual continues day after day, day after day. I don't know, it's becoming such a difficult thing to control this. Forget about you and me. There was an interesting post by Anupam Mittal, the founder of Shadi.com and an investor in Shark Tank. He says, he's so frustrated. He says, ye kya bimari hai yaar? Can somebody find a solution to arrest this constant urge to check the phone every minute or every few minutes? Is it important we should learn? I completely think so. It is important. I'll tell you why. Because I really want to ask a question. Is this social media addiction, is it a hype or is it real? Because I'll tell you what happened when newspaper was introduced commercially in the local trains, the next generation got addicted to it. They started reading. The previous generation people who were watching these guys said, don't be addicted to newspaper because you will lose the social connection. It will ruin the social fabric. Everything will go to dogs, you know. That's exactly what was the comment. And that was the kind of rage. Everybody said, don't read newspapers. But the world moved on. And what is interesting is, same thing happened with radio, same thing happened with Walkman. But now it's happening with the social media. The question is, are we in the same trip? Is it, world didn't stop, obviously, you and I know that very well, but are we in the same league that do we really have to worry so much? Or is it that problematic as much as it is being projected in the media? Everyone is talking about it. Let's find answers to all those questions in this video. Let's get right into it. So the question we need to answer is, why is it so hard to give up on social media? How come hours go by and we don't even realize, and even if we have to study for about half an hour or 1 hour, it feels like eternity, and after genuinely struggling for about an hour to study, we feel as if we have conquered some Mount Everest, and that's not the case with social media. Time just flies by. What's happening? We need to decode this, because I'll tell you what, if we do not, we are going to lose precious things in our life. Our money, our relationship, our health. For them to grow, we need to invest time. But unfortunately, the entire time is being sucked away by the social media. So we have to find a solution. This video is very, very different because we're going to go much deeper. And more importantly, I will help you with those nuances that will completely transform the way you perceive social media and cell phone. I'll tell you what, there is another cult of people who say, you know what, give up on the phone. I said, dude, we can't be dumb. This probably is the most wonderful invention ever happened in the history of mankind. And you want me to give up on that? That's probably a lame suggestion. On one hand, we see the dangers of cell phone. On the other hand, we have to live with it because it's a part of our life. So how do we intelligently develop that relationship with the cell phone? So in this video, let's discover a few things. Number one, what makes it so addictive? You know, whenever we experience something pleasurable, our brain releases a chemical called dopamine. But by the way, it's not dopamine alone. There's another chemical called anandamide, which is another bliss chemical. And it is derived from the Sanskrit word ananda. So they have made it anandamide. So let's stick to it. So we will talk about dopamine and anandamide, and I will refer to it as dopamine throughout the video. So anytime you experience something pleasurable and surprising, our brain releases dopamine. So what does that mean? That means anytime and every time you get a message on your social media or any notification, you are releasing a chemical in the brain that is dopamine. That's a reward or a happy chemical. And it's the same chemical that gets released when a person smokes, drinks, gambles, goes for a drag race, watches inappropriate content, and does drugs. It's the same chemical. That means, in other words, if I have to say, it is highly, highly addictive. So, what's happening here? Very simple. This chemical is released only when we see, I repeat, pleasant, surprising reward. And underline the word surprising. It has to be surprising. That's why when you buy a new phone, you're super excited, but after some time, it no longer excites you because there is nothing surprising about it. That's why people go for a higher and higher levels of excitement. They buy a car, they're super thrilled for a week or so. After some time, it kind of becomes normal. You and I have experienced it. Right? So that means we are always craving. It's called a craving chemical. And we need it all the time to keep us happy. That means our entire life is driven by a chemical called dopamine, and we always need it to be happy and to be excited. And let me tell you, dopamine is produced by everything, even by water or by carrot. But we are always drawn to that activity which produces higher levels of dopamine. For example, if I place a carrot and a chocolate cake in front of you, our mind instantly wants a chocolate cake if you like it, because carrot does produce dopamine in our brain, but not as much as a chocolate cake. So this would mean we are always drawn towards higher levels of dopamine, and we need to understand a little more about this dopamine with an experiment. So let me share an interesting experiment done by Dr. Lucier, Christian Lucier from University of Switzerland, and this was about the effect of dopamine, and he did this experiment with mice. He took one of the mice and he inserted an electrode in its brain. He placed a lever next to the mouse. Every time mouse pressed the lever, it activated the reward center and released dopamine. Guess what happened? The mouse went on pressing the lever. To an extent, it died. It stopped eating, it stopped drinking, it stopped doing anything else. It was so pumped up by the constant avalanches of dopamine, it didn't need anything. And obviously, it neglected the needs of the body. Actual experiment available in Google, you can check it out. And isn't that exactly happening to our kids? When our kids are playing or watching TV or on a social media binging, they are not hungry, they are not thirsty. Parents are yelling at the kids saying, please come for dinner. They couldn't care less. Look at what's happening. That means we are driven by dopamine to such a level that any activity that produces a higher level of dopamine takes over the precedence over the previous one, which is a lower level of dopamine. No wonder things like exercise, studying, mixing with people, doing some hard work never gets interesting, never produces enough dopamine, and gets least importance in our life. So let me tell you one more interesting thing about dopamine. Dopamine is produced at the highest level when the rewards are big, random, and unexpected. Very, very powerful. No wonder gambling is so powerful, because every time a person gets a reward, he gets a massive rush of dopamine. Think about it. Isn't that exactly what the entire world is cashing on? Whether it is PokerBaazi or Dream 11, we've seen these online games, right? That's exactly what these games do. So every time you win, there is a dopamine. Every time there is a surprise, there is a dopamine. And the highest level of surprise, highest level of dopamine is produced by drugs, whether it's cocaine and the meths and stuff like that. So that's the level. No wonder drug addicts absolutely have lost it in life. So what does it mean to us? We have become like those rats. We always want more and more dopamine. So no wonder we check phones every 2 minutes, every 3 minutes, because our body is asking for dopamine. So how does this work? What's actually happening in our brain? Let me introduce you to a very, very powerful concept of what we call addiction loop. Now it starts with trigger, action, rewards, craving. Very, very important. It's called hook. It's called trigger, action, reward craving. What is the trigger of notification from Facebook or any of the social media apps? So what is the action? We open. What is the reward? Dopamine rush. What does that do? We want more of it, right? So when we have this cycle and it doesn't stop, you must be wondering, but Neeraj, what is the problem? Life is cool, right? I mean, I'm enjoying. What's the problem? Yes, there is a problem. What is that? The problem is the same level of dopamine is not going to satisfy you, because body develops what is called a tolerance level. Let me give you with an example. Let's talk about a smoker. He starts smoking the first cigarette. He feels good about it. But do you think the same one cigarette will give him the same amount of pleasure after some time? No, it's a no-brainer, right? So he needs two. After some time it becomes three. After some time it becomes four. Then he goes into a pack a day. And after that he becomes a chain smoker. Similarly with alcohol, right? What starts as a fun or a social drinking, he gets addicted. Same with the drugs. The body develops what is called tolerance level. The previous quantity is no longer enough to give him the same pleasure. That happens with the medicine too, right? So no longer the paracetamol, if you're taking like candies, will help you cure the fever. So what is happening is we want higher levels of dopamine. Just think about it. If I have to give you a parallel to our social media behavior, just think about it. You watch any old movie comedy scenes or a small joke which we used to get about 5-6 years ago in our mobile phone. We used to laugh like crazy. We call this ROFL. Nowadays, those jokes were amazing. Nowadays, people have become insensitive. You know, they look at a mobile phone and they're kind of a scrolling. They don't feel anything. In spite of them being unbelievable reels. That means our tolerance has gone up so high that we are no longer able to enjoy the smaller pleasures. Look at our kids nowadays. They are not attracted to anything. They are not interested in anything. You give them a new dress. They say, yeah, good, thank you. And they're back to gaming. They don't eat if you don't give them a mobile phone. Look at how this entire addiction has eaten away. So we actually asked a question in the beginning of the video. The newspaper, the Walkman and the radio, are we getting into the same phenomena? Probably not. You know why? Because there was an end to newspaper. People couldn't read beyond newspaper. That's it. And there is an end to radio because there were only a few selected programs on, or there was an end to CD or a Walkman because they could only hold so many songs. But in this case, earlier it was either sight or it was audio. Think about it. Our mobile phone has literally replaced hundreds of things and the whole world is in your hand. And whether it is YouTube Shorts or any of the social media apps, these reels do not end. They are like a bottomless pit. They are on a constant roll. Even if we spend our entire life, we cannot complete all the reels. So what's happening here? We are constantly being hit by dopamine rush. So what does that mean? No, this is where the actual danger starts. What is it? We call this dopamine receptor burning. After some time, the rush of dopamine is so high, receptors are burned. I'm talking in a very layman's language. And when they're burned, you no longer experience any pleasure. The smallest of the things which we used to enjoy are no longer enjoyable. That's it. People are not interested in anything, especially the kids. They have lost interest in everything because they no longer enjoy anything because the dopamine receptors are burnt. So to prove this, Dr. Lucia did another experiment. You know what he did? He did an experiment of blocking the reward center of the mouse. And you know what happened? It stopped eating, it stopped drinking, it lost interest in everything and it died. Can you believe it? This is the power of dopamine not producing enough. So today what's happening? The reason why students are not studying is because it is not as high rewarding as a game. They are not studying, they are not able to exercise, they are not able to indulge in a productive activity because they are not as much dopamine producing agents as that of a game or a drug. No wonder people have lost interest in everything. On the next one, we will also discover what will happen if we do not take control over this wonderful invention. All these and much more coming up in the next video.